It was in the suburban streets of Oceanside, New York, where my journey began. At 15, drawn into the underbelly of the drug world, I learned early the harsh realities of life on the edge. I remember the nights spent in dimly lit back alleys, exchanging shady packages for cash, always watching over my shoulder. I made an empire of my own design. At my peak, I had more than 200 grand buried in a hidden spot, but the money I made couldn't be added to my Roth IRA. It came at the expense of living a safe and normal life.
Our newest Kosher Money episode is the incredible, gripping story of Yankel Meislin, a boy from Long Island whose past involves drug dealings, gangs, and hundreds of thousands of dollars of hidden cash. Yankel's jaw-dropping tale is a powerful reminder that true success isn't just about money, but living a life with real values. His transition into a life coach made for a very practical second half of our conversation. We discussed the actual value of business coaching, money lessons he had, and more. I hope you enjoy this conversation as much as I did. Hang on. Being a Jew? Awesome. Managing personal finances? Not so awesome. Welcome to Kosher Money. We're here in our brand new studio, a late night recording. We're here with Yankel Meislin. Yankel, I happen to enjoy late night recordings. They're a different mood, and I feel like the conversation we're about to have is, one of those late night, bump into somebody, where are you from, what do you do? And then the guy's blown away by the response, right? Especially wearing a jacket and a hat. You got the nice beard. So, Yankel, first of all, welcome to the studio.
Thank you so much.
Take me back, right? You're actually our third guest from Oceanside, New York. Our last guest, Dr. Deborah Alpers from there. We had Rabbi Benjamin Blech. Oceanside is not a big place, but it's out here in Long Island. Tell us about your upbringing. Who are you? And let's blow this audience away.
Great. Well, first of all, I'm really honored to be here. Thank you so much for having me. Okay, here we go. You ready?
Let's do it.
All right. So Oceanside, New York, like you said, is a small little town. I'm not sure exactly how many people live there, but it's not too big. It's medium-sized town in Long Island. Nothing particularly special about it, all that much. There isn't much to do there. I was born and raised in Oceanside, New York. My father is a therapist there, and my mother works PR in Manhattan. My life growing up was, at first, your average Long Island existence. Nothing jarring or special about it all that much.
You grew up religious?
No. Typical, well, I would say most of the Jews in Oceanside grew up more like me than they did like the people who go to Young Israel over there. Our connection with Judaism was, the major holidays, Rosh Hashanah, Yom Kippur, Pesach, Hanukkah. And I went to Hebrew school when I wasn't torturing the teachers there, and public school. And that was how I grew up.
So you're not religious. You're going through a typical Long Island upbringing. What was your schooling like? Were you a good kid? Doesn't sound like it. You were torturing teachers. Were you bullied? Did you have a lot of friends? What was your social life like?
I was in a kind of unenviable position. On the one hand, I was a jock, which means that I played sports, and I was fanatic about basketball in particular. So I was on the travel team. There was an AAU team, local, whatever, not Jewish organization team. Mm-hmm. That we played, and we were very serious about it. So I had friends from there, and honestly, a lot of them were people that I grew up with, other Jewish kids like me. But on the other hand, I was also one of the shortest kids in my class in general. I'd say each grade had maybe 500 people each, year, and I was definitely one of the shortest. So for me, that translated to bullying for sure. In the secular world, one of the things that's really highly prized is machoism. And that is not who I am, as much as I tried to pretend like it was. So I had a different tool that I used, and that was my smart mouth. It turns out that people don't really like being insulted. So what happened to me was, when I felt threatened, I would use my wits and my articulation to bring them down. And they would use their superpowers, which was, physicality, to bring me down. And that was certainly very humbling, but also pretty distressing because, the old saying, sticks and stones can break my bones, but words will never hurt me. Well, sticks and stones really hurt. I wish that, the other people would listen to that rhyme when I was growing up. So that was challenging.
Got it. So it sounds like you're heading into a turbulent time in your life, right? Take me into high school and where things sort of went from there.
When I got to high school, this might surprise people to know, but at least in my time when I was there, I'm 18 plus years ago, about 90% of the students were getting high or drinking on the weekend. So obviously it was something that we decided to experiment with. And I found for me that it became a really great elixir to forget the fact that I am a small kid who got physically bullied by my peers. So once I discovered that there was something that could take me out of myself, it became a weekly habit that eventually grew.
And as it grew, what were the challenges you were facing? Did cops get involved, when you were in high school? Was it a lot of detention in school? Was it being grounded? Was this being done quietly as you were dabbling?
So I didn't face too much repercussion at the beginning because it was only, a once in a while type of thing. My parents kind of had some inclination as to what was going on, but at first, they just drew it up to regular high school experimentation, which it was at the beginning. Police did not get involved at that stage, although that was always obviously a fear. You don't want to get caught because then for sure your parents will find out and it's going to be big trouble. It didn't really have a big negative effect on me until we went on a high school class trip to an IMAX theater nearby. We went on a trip there and I decided that I really wanted to enhance my experience of the IMAX theater.
You wanted to go 6D. 3D, 4D wasn't enough.
That wasn't enough for me.
Yeah.
I wanted to enhance my experience by, exponentially. So I set out to try to get my hands on, I was trying to get my hands on weed, which was my real drug of choice. But it was, last minute and very early in the morning, and I couldn't find anybody to help me with that. So I went to my backup plan, which was, those big Absolute bottles that they sometimes have at weddings.
Yeah.
So I had like a third of that left from some party that we had made. And I decided that it would be a good idea to skip breakfast and just, make Absolute my breakfast of champions. And unfortunately, when we got to the IMAX theater, I passed out and, vomited all over myself and got suspended from school for 2 weeks. And that was like the breaking point for my parents. And they said, okay, we've had enough of letting you slide. Now we're going to start to monitor you. And things from there progressively got a little bit worse for me.
So, where were you getting the money to purchase drugs, and which drugs did you start dabbling with from there?
So originally my seed money came from Hanukkah Geld. And I understood that if I want to fund my ambitions, which was essentially to keep myself medicated as often as I possibly could, I would have to come up with a way to make money. Now, I'm 14, 15 years old at this time. So, my options were kind of limited. I worked at a day camp in the summer, but that's not going to last all that long, the money that I made from there. So I had to figure out a different way how to get started. So I saved up a bunch of money, and the way that generally products work in this world is when you buy in bulk, it costs less. So I bought in bulk, and I had 90% of my school to cater to, and particularly, kids in my group, friends of mine. And I would take what I bought in bulk, break it down into smaller pieces, and sell it. And then whatever was left over was what I was able to use to get high.
So now you went from being a user to a dealer, it sounds like, right?
I didn't have much of a choice if I wanted to continue on that path because it got expensive, right? Obviously, the more that you consume, the more money you're going to put into it, and it's a pit. You're throwing it away, kind of like gambling. It's fun, but you're probably not going to get your money back.
Mm-hmm. So you're making money, right? You're starting to make more and more money. How much money did you make as a dealer?
To start off, I was just selling weed, and then we're skipping ahead by a lot in the story. But eventually, when all was said and done, I was making about $200,000 a year with approximately 10 employees.
Is that pre or post tax? No, I'm kidding.
If you put it like that, then technically it could have been more like 400,000.
Right. So what was the next drug that you started dealing after weed?
So I ended up essentially smoking myself into a rehab facility. And I would go there during the day. It was in Glen Cove. So a bus would come to my house in the morning, pick me up, and then drive me home in the afternoon. And I was there. It was supposed to be a 6-month program, and I ended up spending 24 months in this place. So I basically went to high school. Half of my high school career was spent in this rehab facility. And the reason that I ended up staying there for so long was because I kept figuring out ways on how to beat their drug tests. And then eventually I would get caught, and the pattern would repeat itself. I got more sophisticated, and then something would happen, and I would get caught. I would slip in some way, shape, or form. So the last time that I got caught, they gave me an ultimatum. Either you're going to get kicked out of here and sent to a long-term care place, which was like all of our worst nightmares, because here at least we got to go home at the end of the day. We had a little bit of freedom, a little bit. I had the opportunity to, use my drugs if I could figure out a way to get around it. But if I was in a long-term care place, that was like, one step away from jail. So anyway, they gave me an ultimatum. Either you leave here and go to this long-term care facility, or you can go to Narcotics Anonymous meetings and stay sober, obviously. And we're going to thoroughly drug test you here, so that we know that you're not getting around on the system. Or they even resorted to a hair test, which is much more accurate, to stop me. And when I was in Narcotics Anonymous, I met other people who were a little bit more advanced than I was. And their drug of choice was cocaine and heroin. So when I turned 18 and I got myself out of the rehab, I had already a built-in crew of people who would help me make money. And so I hired one of them to be my bodyguard, and I started buying very high purity cocaine and selling it. And then a little bit later came heroin. But I really was lucky because I got out before the fentanyl explosion. That would have been really bad.
Did you ever think you were going to die from drug usage?
No. I personally was very strict to maintain something that I heard in a very popular song. I don't know if you've ever heard it. I don't know if you listen to this kind of music. In fact, I'm sure you've never heard it. It's called the 10 Crack Commandments by Notorious B.I.G. And one of the commandments is never get high on your own supply. And I really was more or less took that to heart. And the only drug that I've ever done that's ever been inside of my body is weed. But I was highly addicted to the lifestyle of what having $200,000 as a 19-year-old kid could get me.
What propelled you to get a bodyguard? What were you seeing or experiencing?
So when I was 15, right before I went into rehab, I had aside for being bullied, on a more fringe level, like the people who were in my group. Besides for that, there were a lot of people in the high school who knew that I was dealing and were quite literally hunting me. So I would be walking around town, which is what we did on a Friday night or a Saturday night. I would walk around town, get high, because if you're in one place, the chances of getting caught are much higher. So I would walk around and people would call. I'd tell them where to meet me. That was how I conducted my business. But every time that I would walk around, I would hear people calling out to me from cars. And there was, at one point, I got jumped really badly, not too far away from my house, and robbed. And so after I got out of rehab and I wanted to kind of reset, one of the things that I didn't want to happen was getting robbed, because it's really embarrassing and also really detrimental to business, because if you're viewed in that world as a target, then, you might as well just pack it up and go home. And two is the machinery necessary to keep me safe. If it's on me, plus getting pulled over with 10 bags of cocaine, that's an automatic sentence, even if you don't have any priors. So I wanted to kind of separate myself from that possibility.
Where does a 19-year-old with $200,000 keep $200,000?
Great question. Not in a bank.
Right.
Yeah. So I actually held down a day job for a little while at this time. I worked at a drive-through Starbucks. I'm not going to say which one, but I worked at a drive-through Starbucks, and that kind of became my daytime center of activities, I guess you could call it, or my daytime headquarters. So if anybody ever pulled up to my Starbucks and asked for a cup of water in a hot cup, that was code for, you want something from me, illicitly.
Poor old lady who literally wanted a
Nobody
cup of water.
ever wants that. If you want water, you get it in in the regular plastic
Right.
cups. But if you ask for it in a non-see-through cup, then I knew that you were there for me. So, and also there's no payment for that. So I don't raise any red flags. So I held down that job, but that was obviously not enough to prove that I had such a high amount of money, right? Like I couldn't just go to the bank and say, I work at Starbucks, here's my pay stub plus an extra 10 grand and like not raise any red flags. So what I did was I would put it into a sneaker box that I had laying around, and I buried it.
Buried it.
Yes.
That's
That
not
was
fun.
one of the methods. The other method that I used was I reinvested. So like I said before, the more that you buy in bulk, the cheaper it's going to be. So if you get more, it becomes cheaper. And at that time already, there was enough of a demand to justify making that decision and pay my employees. That's also where money went.
Where are you burying it? At home in the backyard?
No, I couldn't do that. I buried it at unsuspecting people's yards. People like, friends of mine who
didn't know it was
who
buried
didn't
there.
know that it was buried there, right? So they couldn't steal it from me. I would go to their homes in the middle of the night. This was before CCTV was a thing, and use their property to bury it in a discreet spot.
Has all the money been unburied?
I'll be honest with you. I really, that was one of the things I thought about when you asked me to be on Kosher Money.
Yeah.
Is to tell this particular part of the story. I never went anywhere by myself, so I assume that that the money was dug up by people that I worked with or that worked for me at some point. The way that my story progressed, at the end, I kind of made an attempt to trade my riches for my life without actually communicating that. I just left everything behind and, disappeared. So I didn't want to have anything to do with those funds in any way, shape, or form.
A short, cool break from this week's episode to tell you about the weather. The weather? Yes, the weather. Warmer months are ahead, and that's the perfect segue into Twillory's ear suit. You see, I'm wearing the blazer, comes with matching pants. But when you're wearing a traditional suit and it's kind of hot outside, you begin to sweat. But those days are gone with the Twillory ear suit. They have this cooling mesh fabric that's commonly found in sportswear, and it's upscaled, retailored for use in this ear suit. So it functions like their other suits and blazers. It has that extreme stretch, comfort, no wrinkles, plenty of pockets, and it's machine washable. So if you are dry cleaners, turn this off. This is not for you. But if you hate paying money and you want suits in different colors, lengths, long, short, regular, variety of sizes, and you want free shipping and returns, I have some good news for you. Promo code CHAI, C-H-A-I. That's $18 in Hebrew, Twillory.com/kosher money. No reason you can't be comfortable, relaxed, cool during the summer and spring months. You're welcome. Twillory.com/kosher money, promo code CHAI. They're pretty amazing. Lots of colors, by the way. Okay, cool. Now back to this week's episode. What caused you to want to move on from this life? And how old were you when you did that?
Okay, here we go. So I had a bodyguard. He was a gang member in, one of the gangs that you would know if I said the name. It happened to be that he was a white guy, which made him at least two times more dangerous, because in order for a person like that to prove himself to get into a gang, you have to really prove yourself. So he brought along a childhood friend of his who happened to be a hitman for the mafia, allegedly. And apparently in the mafia, if you use heroin, it's a big no-no. You become a liability of sorts for all different kinds of reasons. But one of them, I suspect, or at least this was explained to me, that when you are coming down, heroin is a physically addictive drug. So if you get caught and you are coming down while in prison, you're more likely to, what's the politically correct word to use? You're more likely to turn sides in order to get a fix. So it's a big deal. This hitman found out that my bodyguard was using heroin. And it was absolutely horrible. That's part of the reason why I got stabbed at one point, and part of the reason why I have a tooth that's not real because he knocked it out. It became dangerous for me to be around him because his habit started outgrowing his salary and he would demand more. And I would try my hardest not to give it up to him. But in the end, the threat of physical violence, which was really real, obviously, overtook that, and he was kind of embezzling from me. I mean, it wasn't really even embezzling. He's still stealing it in front of my face, and I couldn't do anything about it. I tried to cut ties with him once, and that didn't work out very well for me. Anyway, so the hitman found out that my bodyguard is using heroin, and he hatched a scheme. I don't know why or how, but he called up my mother. I don't think he introduced himself or said, his occupation, but he did use his first name so that I would know that it was him who called. And he told my mother, listen, your son is in grave danger. He doesn't belong in this world. You need to get him out. And I had been contemplating, how am I going to wrestle myself from the grip of this bodyguard? Because essentially, the only way I saw that I was going to get out of this was to eliminate him, which would also eliminate my business as just a matter of consequence, right? You can't just hang around and pretend like nothing happened after something like that. And I decided against that choice. My mother gave me an ultimatum. She said, you have a choice. You can either leave there and we'll help you get away. Did I mention that my father is a drug therapist?
You mentioned he is a therapist.
Okay, so he had some connections that he could help me, rehabs that he knew about. Or my mother said, or basically, like, you need to get away from here because it's dangerous. And because I didn't see any other way out from a business perspective, like, how am I going to ever get out from this guy who is robbing me in broad daylight? I took her up on the offer.
Wow. How old were you at that age?
19. So by that time, I had guns in my face. I had been stabbed. I had been beaten up a few times, and I was getting tired. I wasn't seeing a way that I'm going to come out on top of this and evade jail and, ever really get to enjoy the riches of all of my hard work, my blood, sweat, and tears, quite literally.
What was your street name?
It depends who called, but J.O. was one of them, or just J.
What was day one of Yankel's life?
The part 2?
Yeah.
My father offered me 2 choices. I could go to rehab in Pennsylvania, or I can go to rehab in Florida, in Boca. I didn't want to go to Pennsylvania because it was too close. It was like only a drive away, and I figured that if somebody were to find out that I'm there, I could be located. So you might ask yourself the question, like, what do they want from you at that point? Valid. But usually the way that it goes is you don't want to have too many people who have information about illegal things that you did above your head if you can avoid it. So, and how do I know that they were after me? Because I spent 2 weeks in hiding before I went to rehab, and they would knock on my parents' door. They broke into my car just to let me know that they're around. And they knew that at that point I was, disappearing because I had just left in thin air. So I went to this rehab in South Florida, and the philosophy of the rehab was very much in line with the 12-step programs. The 12-step programs require of you to, as the first step, to find a God of your understanding. And up until that point, I had been an absolute atheist, totally. Didn't believe in anything, but I was humbled. I was really what they call rock bottom. I really hit rock bottom. I was just like, broke. I had nothing except the clothes on my back, and that was it. So one day they took us to a meeting, a 12-step meeting. And in the 12-step meeting, there was a nice old lady who was telling the story of the binding of Isaac. So the story goes that God gives Abraham a son at the age of 99, right? And he promises him that through this son is going to be, a nation that's as vast as the stars and the dust. But also, before he has the chance to realize that dream, before Isaac gets married and has children, God tells him, you know what I want you to do now? Take him and slaughter him as a sacrifice to me. And Abraham, obviously, he agrees because it was a test and he had faith. And even though it didn't make sense, but he agreed to do it. And he takes his son, Isaac, up to the mountain, and he's about to slaughter him until an angel calls out and says, wait, don't do it. So as she's telling this story, and I am in my broken state of being, I'm noticing the parallels to my own situation. Like, okay, my father is like Abraham, but in my story, instead of God asking him to sacrifice me, I kind of took us both up the mountain and had him hold the knife to my throat. And, I was willing to sacrifice myself for what? And at that moment, I started to cry, which was something that I hadn't done for a long time because it was absolutely forbidden in that world to show any kind of weakness or emotion in that way. And I realized that how many people that are alive get to say that their life was saved by a hitman and have the audacity to claim that there's no God. And I remembered back to my Hebrew school days. God took the Jews out of Egypt. He released them from bondage. And he did the same thing for me. My own personal Egypt, my own personal bondage. And so I asked my father, send me those black boxes. Send me a Torah. And he sent me also a Siddur. And when I was in the rehab, there was a modern Orthodox fellow there, and he taught me how to daven. 3 steps back, 3 steps forward, bow a few times. So at the beginning, I took my bed sheet and I used it as a talus before the things my father sent came. And I just, poured out my heart to Hashem. That was day one.
Wow, well said. That's a journey. That's a journey. So you're now, you said 30?
I'm 36.
36. So this was a lifetime ago, right? You've lived now almost just as much as part one of your life. You're married?
I'm married.
You're a sofer. You write Hebrew lettering into scriptures. You're a business coach, a public speaker, an author. You have a book. How did you go from day one to where you are now? What happened as you healed?
You're asking for a story?
Okay.
All right. So day one, I'm in the rehab and I'm becoming closer to Hashem in the way that I kind of understood. And for me, it was not enough to just practice on my own to my limited understanding. And I noticed that on Sunday mornings, a particular segment of the rehab would disappear for a few hours. And when they came back after I noticed, I asked them, where did you go? And they said, we went to church. Okay, great. I would like to go to synagogue. And so they sent me to a synagogue the next Friday night that had the average age was Joe Biden and up. And obviously I didn't really feel like I fit in well at that particular place. It wasn't an Orthodox place, and also just the age gap was a little bit too wide. I mean, these people could have been my great-grandparents or my grandparents. And so I was a little bit dissatisfied with that, and I asked them to help me find somewhere else to go. And the director of the program, also a Jewish guy, found me a Chabad shliach who happens to live in that area, and his shlichus is to help Jewish men and women who find themselves in rehab. So I went to his house, and I was absolutely blown away by his hospitality. The first time I was slated to go there, I remember very vividly. It was a Friday afternoon. We're sitting, all of us at the rehab, in an ice cream store. We're sitting in this ice cream store, and somebody comes up to, the crowd of us and starts asking for me by name. My heart starts pounding. Like I legitimately thought that this is possibly an assassin who's come to take my life away. He looked like he could maybe be a rabbi. He had a very long beard, but he wore Metallica clothes and had a lot of tattoos. So I thought, like, this is like Charlie Manson 2.0, and I'm going to die right now. It turns out that he was a guy who was in rehab and a little bit more progressed than me, and he was coming to drive me to the Chabad house. Obviously, on Friday afternoon, very close to Shabbos, the shliach didn't have the availability to come pick me up, so he sent this nice gentleman to come take me. And so he brings me to the rabbi's house, and we come in, and the rabbi's kids, start jumping all over Marilyn Manson, and I'm like, wow, we're so different. Look at, he's a guy who listens to heavy metal and has tattooed all over his whole body. And I'm a guy who just not long ago came off the street, and here I am in this house unsupervised. And he trusts me enough to be around his children. He's not even here yet. He's at shul. I was really blown away by that. And the food was outstanding. And I asked to keep coming back. And I came back, and I came back, and I came back, and I heard more deeper Torah thoughts that I had never been exposed to, in my conservative Hebrew school. This wasn't the type of thing that we had ever learned about. So the shliach essentially makes me a part of his family, and I came back every single week until I was able to leave the rehab halfway house situation that I was in after I graduated, and I got myself an apartment across the street from the Chabad house, so I could walk there and essentially keep Shabbos. And I worked in a ice cream store that wasn't kosher, and I quit, and I got a job at a Judaica store in Boca Raton, Florida. We made a deal, my parents and I and the rabbi, that if I agree to go to college for a year and complete it, they will allow me to go for a summer to yeshiva in Eretz Yisrael. So I went and signed up for the local community college. And while I was in class, most of the classes I really couldn't tolerate all that much. I would do, learn Chumash and learn the scriptures and other texts in the back of the room and try to skate by as much as I could on Cliff Notes and whatever else to get passing grades. But in semester number 2, I was outside of the college feeding my nicotine habit, and a car pulls up that I recognize. It was a rival dealer with his New York plates, and he walked right up to me and passed me. And I was absolutely freaking out. Why is he here? Is he looking for me? This is a community college, the equivalent of Nassau Community College in Palm Beach County. What are you doing here? And I never stepped foot on the campus again because I was really afraid. Even though he walked right past me and he kind of nodded at me, but it was way too close for comfort. This was a person who had threatened to kill me in the past. And I was just very, to use the term, I was shook. And so I told my parents, I can't stay here anymore. I have progressed beyond what this community can offer me, and I need to go pursue my studies, and I cannot go back to campus because it's dangerous. And they begrudgingly acquiesced to my request and sent me to Israel. I started to learn in a yeshiva in a little town very close to the airport called Kfar Chabad. It smells like cows. It is, basically a little Russian village that was implanted in the middle of the tech-savvy Israel country. And I absolutely loved my time there. I was, anonymous as could be. I grew, I was learning every single day, 14-hour days of learning or whatever it equaled. And I just absolutely loved it.
A brief pause from this exciting episode to tell you about an incredible tool for those passionate about maximizing their charitable giving. We've been telling you about the Donors Fund, which allows you to contribute to your favorite causes, your favorite charities, while enjoying immediate tax deductions and maintaining control of where your tzedakah, your hard charity, is directed. But what truly sets the Donors Fund apart is their robust investment service. I haven't told you too much about it, but when you contribute to the Donors Fund, your charitable dollars don't just sit there, right? You can choose from a variety of in-house managed investment pools or even collaborate with a personal wealth manager to have the money managed for you. That's the Donors Fund. It means your donations can grow tax-free over time, potentially increasing the impact of your charitable gifts. Imagine being able to support more causes and make a bigger difference simply by allowing your contributions to grow before they're granted. The Donors Fund provides you with the tools to do just that. How do you get the account for free? Visit thedonorsfund.org/koshermoney. Links in the show notes. You'll learn more about that investment tool, their other services, and you can really start maximizing your charitable impact today. So let's say you want a tax deduction, right? You're not sure where to put the money. You can give the money to the Donors Fund. They'll hold on to it, and you will have the ability to then take the tax deduction and have the money grow, right? You're through the investment portfolio. Obviously, you have to speak to your Rav and ensure that it grows so that when you're ready to give it, boom, more money is given to tzedakah. Win-win. Link is in the show notes. You can sign up while you're listening to this episode. It is free. You can get these custom checkbooks. They have a lot. They have a really cool app. Just put the money in there and all your tax deductions get funneled into the single app/website, whatever's your jam. Okay, now back to this week's episode. It sounds like you turned your life around, right? A lot of people who heard the first part of your story would think that it doesn't have a good ending, but you're now married. You have quite a bit on the business side that keeps you busy. Let's pivot and move into there. How are you making money today in 2024?
So I would say my main focus at the moment is coaching. I came up with a kind of a plan that I wanted to do. I wanted to write a book, speak about the book, and then meet with people one-on-one to have a real impact. Because I feel like if you speak in a place, it's nice kind of motivation, but it's not long-lasting inspiration. That was my experience. But if you meet with somebody one-on-one over a period of time, that could really totally change the directory of somebody's life, and very appealing to me, because that's essentially how I got into coaching in the first place. Was a good friend of mine who was a sofer, colleague of mine. He somehow had gotten into the world of coaching himself, and he offered me to have a conversation. And when I sat across from him and he really broke down every single wall that I believed about what was holding me back from living the life that I really wanted to, right, in front of my eyes, I was like, I really would love to do that for somebody else. And why not from such a place of, compassion and understanding for somebody who came from where I came from, to propel that forward. So now I make most of my money from coaching. When I'm not coaching, I write or check to fill in, which is, there's a reason why I left that field in the first place. I think there's I'm going to use air quotes here, a curse on Sofrim that they shouldn't be rich from the Gemara, from the Talmud. So it's not known to be like a very, lucrative
right.
lucrative profession. And speaking and my book.
Are you doing life coaching or business coaching or both?
The truth of the matter is that really those two things are essentially one and the same, right? But I find that if you approach a business person and tell him, hey, would you like to make your life better? It's a harder sell because there's a stigma about that to begin with. First of all, anytime somebody hears the word coach, they automatically assume, or maybe this is my experience, the association is like there's something wrong with me and this coach is trying to fix me. And so it's like, back up, like, who are you? You failed at life. You were a drug dealer. Like, you're going to tell me how to live a successful life? Or let's take, for example, a guy who's not from anymore, not religious anymore, or never was, right? Why? You're going to tell me the only thing you've ever done is had 6 kids, I don't need your advice. But that's not really what coaching is actually about. Thank God.
What is it about?
If I had to describe it in the simplest terms possible, it's getting to the core of the person who you're sitting across from's beliefs about what is holding them back. Because I'll give a perfect example is how I ended up on this podcast, right? Like, I looked at the list of people who have been on this podcast before. You've got some very, very, very famous, qualified names, right? And it's not like you found me because I wrote an Amazon book that was self-published, right? How did this come about? Well, let's put it this way. Before I ever got coached, this never would have come about. After I got coached, I saw a video that Yaakov did. It was interesting to me. I thought to myself, if his story can get on there, that sounds like I couldn't get on there. Why not? And I sent him a copy of a video promo that I did for myself. And I said, hey, I would love to come on your podcast if you'll have me. And like a day later, 2 days ago, yesterday, he sent me his number. Yes, give me a call. And that set it all in motion.
There's this skepticism that comes with business coaching, right? Where someone will say, oh, you want to make my business successful? You couldn't be successful. And the proof of that is you don't have a business. Your whole business is helping other businesses. If you were so good, start a business and run a business. Is that a flawed way of thinking? Does it depend? And if so, what's your response?
So I think a huge misconception about coaching in general is that it's kind of a blurring of the lines between coaching and consulting. What's the difference between a coach and a consultant? A consultant is somebody who is an expert in the field in which you are, right? So if you're a media company, right, you would go to whoever it is the biggest media company, the guy at the CEO of that company, and ask him, what should I do, very specifically speaking, to get from where I am as a media company to where you are as a media company? A coach, on the other hand, almost ideally would not have that expertise, because the less I know about your business, the freer I am to ask questions that nobody would ask, which in turn opens up within the person whose business it is avenues which were never considered, because the conventional wisdom is, you do this, you do this, you do this, you do this. So then, I mean, technically speaking, so go watch a video about how the head of NBC became the head of NBC, and you don't need a consultant or a coach. So why are you not doing it? Why are you not NBC?
So you're saying that there are things/limitations that are very specific to the individual that needs unpacking and working through, that you are coming in with an open mind and helping them get past that road bump.
Ideally, yes.
Right. I never realized that there was a difference between a coach and a consultant. So as a coach, what are you seeing within business owners? If there were a couple of things that come to mind that, and there are plenty of business owners, there are managers, what are some things that you're seeing within business that are holding people back from being either the best version of themselves or succeeding within business?
Great question. So let's separate this into two different categories, right? There's the entrepreneurs, or the people who are at the helm. And then there are employees who they each have their separate, distinct reasons for which they're not succeeding. So let's take the CEO, entrepreneur for a second. A lot of people imagine, and this was even true about me in my own business. When I first started, I'm going to sell to the whole world. So if I'm making an ad, let's say, or if I'm writing a piece of content on, whether it be on LinkedIn or anywhere else, I'm going to try to make it as broad as possible so that anybody who watches it will be appealed by that ad. Now, what I have found is, as a consumer of media in general, when somebody goes that broad, it stops speaking to anyone in particular, because you're trying to reach such a broad field. I'll give you an example. I was working with a guy who was a jeweler, and I know that he's a frum, religious guy working in the Jewish community, right? So he put up an ad on February 14th. Now, that is not a holiday that's particularly observed in the Orthodox community, at least not openly, It might be, privately observed or whatever. People do something. They bring a bouquet of roses home for their wife, but it's not. Anyway, so he's living in a very religious area, and most of the people that he serves are religious people like him. So he puts up this ad. I sent him a message can you explain this to me, please? I don't understand. Who are the people who buy from you? Religious Jews. Do religious Jews celebrate this holiday? I don't know. So why are you putting out an ad that has to do with this particular holiday? Save that for, the Jewish equivalent of that. If that's your audience, right? Your audience is not the people who celebrate this holiday, and that's okay, right? There are times during the year when it's encouraged for a Jewish man to purchase his wife jewelry. There's 3 times a year where it's, according to our tradition, is when you're supposed to do it. There's no lack. You need to, who are you talking to?
So you're helping them basically see things from another angle that a business owner sometimes gets lost in the minutia of the day-to-day or doesn't see that.
Yes.
We've been telling you, awesome Kosher Money listeners, about the phenomenal work Kol Chabad is doing in Israel to help combat hunger and more. But did you know they have a therapy center in Tzfas dedicated to treating those with PTSD? Yes, it's a free therapy center for soldiers and civilians suffering from PTSD and anxiety from this horrible war. The center's only a few months old, but it incredibly has helped thousands of soldiers and civilians who are suffering from PTSD as a result of experiencing war and terrorism. They're doing incredible work. Many cannot afford the therapy required to heal properly, and that's where Kol Chabad comes in. They cover the costs, and people like you are helping Kol Chabad with this important service. So if you have the ability, give whatever amount you can give. Please visit kolchabad.org/koshermoney and give. You can give a one-time donation. You can give a recurring donation. Help our family and friends in Israel. Help them recover. Help them heal. If you're listening to this while you're driving, pull over. Click on the show notes. If you're listening to this in bed, click on the link. Donate what you can. The link is in the show notes. And we hope one day we'll get to a time where we won't even need this service. Now back to this week's episode. What about people that are not business owners? Right? Employees. What are you seeing there that's giving people challenges?
So when you have an employee, or when you are an employee, one of the biggest things that I see is kind of like a double-edged sword. So on the one hand, they're constantly worried about getting fired.
Mm-hmm.
And on the other hand, they're super judgmental of the people that they're working with. So a lot of times what I've found is that it's not really a happy situation for them, because it's almost like, they're under the guillotine all the time, because if they screw up, then they might get fired. And on the other hand, they're like looking around at the person who got the raise, at the person who got the promotion, and is super bitter about it. So let's just imagine for a second that that's the way that you show up to work. Are you going to be the best version of yourself showing up like that? Like, is that going to help you to become the person who gets the raise or the promotion at some point?
Mm-hmm.
Doubt it.
Yeah, office politics is very noisy, and it's almost like that evil inclination, just pushing people back and forth. So how does a business coach? What's the relationship look like, and how are you charging for that? Is that a retainer, or are you month to month with entrepreneurs? How does that work?
So I try not to create a scenario where I am needed on a continuous basis, right? I want to create a scenario where the person or persons that I'm working with take the skills, the tools, the mind shifts that we have enlightened during our time together and use those without me. Because otherwise then they become dependent on me. And that is the opposite of empowering somebody to become their best self. So ideally, I would like to work with people for no more than a year, and ideally about 6 months. Because it takes a long time to undo all of the things that got you to where you are now, or to even tweak them, to even identify them to begin with is a challenge. And to tweak it and to maintain that tweak until it becomes a part of you, it takes time.
How much of the job or your job is listening versus talking / guiding them?
I try to talk as least as possible.
Mm-hmm.
My main job is, but I try to listen with as empathetic an ear that I possibly can, but also to call someone out on their blind spots.
Got it. And what does a coach charge roughly, or at least in your situation in 2024? What are we talking about? Is this many hundreds of thousands of dollars? What are we talking about?
There are coaches that could cost that much. I am more closer to the tens than the hundreds. It's not cheap, and it's not designed to be cheap. If something is cheap, then the person who's receiving the service, let's just take, I don't mean to bash therapy. My father's a therapist, but in therapy, the way that it's situated is you pay per session, and the fee is, I mean, it's not like nothing, but it's also not, bank breaking. And so what I have found as a person who also spent lots of time in therapy throughout my life is that the change is a lot more gradual because the stakes are a lot lower. And I don't want to get into therapy and that model, but generally in coaching, it's more of a high stakes change faster approach, ideally. So the cost up front is more expensive than a therapy session that you can decide next week you don't want to come.
Interesting. And do people approach you and say, hey, this is a space I want to get into? When someone approaches you, are there certain personality types that would lend itself to a career in coaching?
Certainly, yeah. So actually, I do get asked this by some people. Somebody just yesterday was mentioning how he would like to get into it. Some people have a common misconception that if you're a very smart person who says very witty things, you're going to be a good coach. I'm not sure about that. I think it might be the opposite. The more inquisitive you are, essentially what I'm trying to do is peel back layers of the, onion that is the person sitting across from me until they discover the answer for themselves. And I can only do that by probing them, right? It's not me. I'm not the one who has to live your life or your business or whatnot. I am here to facilitate you getting to a deeper and deeper and a deeper level until you get to what you could consider to be, your inner wisdom.
As someone who has peeled layers away from people, what challenges do you see, whether it's entrepreneurs, employees, as it relates to finances? Does that come up in coaching?
Sure.
Money-related challenges?
Absolutely. Some people, I will meet with them, and then it turns out that they viewed coaching more as like a hobby type thing than they did like a serious endeavor. So when you tell a person like that the price, they're kind of taken aback because they didn't really view it in the same way. That's one thing. Then you have people who agree. Yes, I want to do this. Yes, I want to do this. And they will sign the contract or the agreement, whatever you want to call it. And we've had to stop in the middle because, they didn't pay. They were chronically paying late. Habits in which if they were able to overcome would be really useful for them. And that probably are pervasive throughout their life. But I can't force them. I can't reach into their bank account and pull the money out. And people who, in general, are skeptical of their ability to realize the change which they seek. And so for them, it becomes like, oh my God, if I invest $10, $12, $15,000 into my own development, and then it turns out that I'm like a lazy person who doesn't do anything, what does that say about me? And all the money that I just spent?
So you have a basically an inside look at how people sometimes feel about money. What are some other thoughts you have as it relates to people spending money, how they view money? We often hear, Jews like a good deal, right?
Yeah, sure. So I've seen a few clips of people who come on and they're right about what they say, and that the one that stuck out to me particularly was there was a rabbi who came on and was talking about the concept of keeping up with the Joneses. I think something to that effect, and that is very true. Like I find that concept to be nonsensical. That's not really authentic to whoever you are, right? If you're trying to get a Honda with more features than your neighbor, like, okay, that's not it. But at the same time, from the other perspective, there is also a way to show up to life that is kind of diminishing in terms of integrity, diminishing in terms of energy draining. And that is people who love to haggle and find deals, and they want it the cheapest, and they try to, exploit the other person's desire to be hired. That's also something that comes up, I can get this for cheaper down the block. Or the people who, will spend hours and hours looking for coupons that ends up saving them like $5. You just spent hours doing that. Isn't your time worth money? I'll give you a small example. I had a client who was a divorcee, owned a house and a very expensive car. And somehow in the middle of a conversation, it came up that one of his favorite hobbies is to go on eBay and buy secondhand basketball jerseys for his kids. And I was just absolutely shocked by this behavior. Like, you are what the world would call wealthy. Do you really need to go looking for the deal and bidding on a secondhand jersey for your kid that costs, $75? Like, is that really going to break the bank for you if you buy it out of the box? And this theme was showing up other parts of his life. He was so worried about a prospective date, I think it was, like, how much is this going to cost me to go on a date with this person? Like, are you serious? You're not anywhere near poverty. Why are you living like this? Isn't that energy draining to you? Like, how does that feel to be in that space? But nobody had ever mentioned it to him before, or thought to mention it, or maybe all the people that are in his circle just live like that. Like, that's so automatic for them that it wasn't out of the ordinary.
I think you find that a lot when people have it ingrained in them as a child, if they didn't grow up with money, and then they're older and they do have, high levels of money, that nature of, can I get it for a little bit cheaper? Or, yeah, I'll call 7 different airlines and maybe try to bring the price down by $111. It's time, it's energy.
Absolutely.
It's a sickness almost.
Almost.
Yeah.
So I challenged him,
Yeah.
that guy. I said to him, I want you to make a reservation at the most expensive steakhouse in Manhattan, and I want you to take your grandfather on a dinner date there and buy him the most expensive steak, to like beat this out of your system. And he did it. And as far as I know, I stopped working with him after that. Not like because of that, but that's how he changed from that point on. Once I pointed out to him, like, why are you spending so much energy in that way of that mode of thinking?
Right. It's almost imprisoning, mentally.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Absolutely imprisoning. I mean, this is not to say, as a disclaimer, to go, max out all of your credit cards because you want to live the abundant lifestyle.
Right.
But it's also to say, like, buying a steak every once in a while at a restaurant as a way to, celebrate yourself for nothing, like not connected to any accomplishment, because that's a whole separate conversation. Just because is a nice way to live. Why not?
Right. Some good thoughts here. I like it. Before we get your closing remarks, if someone does have a follow-up question, if someone might be struggling with something you did mention, or just wants to say hello, what's the best way to reach out to you?
Probably the most direct way would be LinkedIn. You can find me on LinkedIn, and you can put my LinkedIn there. Or if you want to get 3 free chapters of my book, you can go to my website.
What is it?
IgniteYourFlameCoaching.com.
IgniteYourFlameCoaching.com. That's awesome. Okay, so we are Money podcast. I know it was more story driven with some different key takeaways throughout. We spoke about the coaching and the career path. What's something we didn't cover that I should have asked you? What's something that you would want to share with many tens of thousands of people, hopefully hundreds of thousands of people over the years that we didn't cover?
Something that we didn't really discuss all that much, we kind of hit on it a little bit, was how many times I have had to take myself from zero and rebuild. Because it wasn't just that one time that I had to do that, right? So when I was living in Israel, I lived in Israel for 2 years before I got married and 5 years after. And I was learning new skills. I became a scribe, and it was difficult. I didn't start off, a successful scribe. It takes time. And I had to move to America in order to become more successful, I suppose. That was the path that I took. So that was another start from zero. And, I was living in my parents' basement in Oceanside, in the house that I grew up in, with 3 kids for a little while. And then, climbed the ladder at the job that I was at until I got to the top. And then, I was at the top for 3 years, right hand to the boss. And there was nowhere left to climb. And so I started again. I became an independent scribe. And that wasn't particularly successful for me, so I started again. And I became a coach. And that was going well, but it had certain things that I wanted to improve. So I wrote a book. So what I mean to say is that failure is not the end. I failed many times in my life, many. And not to say that it's all peaches and cream and, lovely, sure, yeah, you'll learn something and take that. I literally mean that it's this thing that happened to me, this failure that happened was the best thing that could have possibly happened. Do I know exactly in this moment how that is? I definitely don't know if I don't want to look at it. But if I really do examine it, I can find at least something that this failure was actually the greatest thing that ever happened to me. If I hadn't had the hitman call my mother, I would never have become frum. I probably would be dead. If I didn't if I didn't leave Israel and come to America, I would be sitting right now under rocket fire from Hezbollah in Tzfat, or who knows what. But in other words, I can objectively say that those were the best things that ever happened to me, as painful as it was. And I take that with me to not bring me down, but to elevate me to who I am now.
Beautiful. Yankel, thank you so much for joining us. This was certainly a different episode, but a super, super interesting story with quite a few takeaways. So thank you so much for coming down.
Thank you for having me.
What a phenomenal conversation with Yankel Meislin. We could have covered so much more. After the conversation, I spoke to him. Hey, you were a drug dealer, right? How do you apply that into your everyday business life legally? And he told me one example is when he was buying drugs, he could have taken products on consignment. So he wouldn't pay the dealer, his dealer, right away. And then he would give the supplies to people, they would pay it, and then he would pay the supplier back. But the problem he ran into is if, God forbid, the drugs were stolen or lost, he would be out, and that would be very dangerous. But he says the same thing in real business. You can borrow things and hope to pay people back, but then people start questioning your integrity, you can damage your reputation, and he's very careful about how he goes about borrowing. So there's a lot in there. You can buy his book. We put a link to the show notes. And he is a phenomenal person. It goes to show that no matter how far someone falls, you can get back up. Our thanks to C.A. Green of BehindTheBeardMedia.com. He made the introduction. He actually made the intro video. It's a little bit of a longer piece. Really phenomenal work. So if you're in the market for a marketing video at a great price. Look him up. Link to his contact in the show notes. Thank you to our sponsors, Twillory. I'm sporting their shirt here. Kol Chabad, give a donation through the Donors Fund. All those links are in the show notes, and we're very particular about the advertisers we feature. So you can rest assured that they have passed our background checks, and you can contribute, buy, sponsor, tell your friends, tell your mother, tell everyone you know. We're also giving away helpful books to some of the commenters on our video. Our newest winners commented on our previous video. Those are Chava Rubin and Rebecca Keller. You just won Rabbi Daniel Lappin's best-selling Thou Shall Prosper book. And hit us up on livinglechaim.com and we'll get those books over to you. If you want to enter for the chance to win a Dave Ramsey book, simply leave a comment with the word wow. You can use the word wow in your comment however you want on this video. Put it in a sentence and you'll be entered for the chance to win an awesome Dave Ramsey book, and we'll announce the winners in the next episode. If you're in the market for financial guidance and not sure where to turn, you want career advice, you have compounding debt, you want help creating a budget, visit the brand new livingsmarterjewish.org website, new and improved. You can email our friend Zevi over there, info@livingsmarterjewish.org, or visit livingsmarterjewish.org. It's as easy as that. If you enjoy Living L'Chaim and you want to help fuel the work we do, you can give us a 501c3 donation. The money you give gets funneled right back into this, and we invest. We made this beautiful studio. We're coming out with more shows. livinglechaim.com/donate, or you can find us on the Donors Fund. Wink, wink. If you have a guest suggestion, visit livinglechaim.com and drop us a note. Don't forget to check out my brother's shows, because one day maybe he'll be as popular as me. Just kidding. He's right there. Until next time, keep your money kosher. Bye-bye.
Living L'Chaim.